Welcome to Open Minds. I'm your host, Christopher Balkrin, and there have been pro-Palestinian protests, try saying that 10 times fast, across universities here in Canada, the United States, McGill University in Montreal, and more recently here in Toronto at the University of Toronto. And I've always been perplexed by what exactly students are calling for. So, interestingly enough, CTV News recently sat down with the leader, or the official spokesperson, I shouldn't say leader, the spokesperson for the protests here at the University of Toronto. And here's what Sarah had to say.
I guess she's a graduate student at the U of T. She's the official spokesman for the encampment on campus. Hey,
Spokesman.
Sarah, thanks for taking some time. I know it's busy, but it's good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, the message you guys are trying to send here.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you about it. We have come together to demand that our institution align its investment practices and academic partnerships with international law and human rights values. This is, of course, concerning the ongoing genocide in Palestine. Our ultimate goal is to urge U of T to be a leader in divesting from the oppression of Palestinians. We want our institution to listen to us, to acknowledge the gravity of the situation, and then, of course, to take meaningful steps towards justice. Divestment is not only achievable, but necessary. It has been done before for South African apartheid. It must happen again. We will not leave, like you mentioned, until our demands are met.
Okay, let's pause right there. So, very similar to the boycott, divest, and sanction movement, BDS, back in 2005, which urged governments around the world to divest from Israel. But why didn't Sarah and others actually look at the investment portfolio of the University of Toronto? Now, I'm not going to be sounding flippant, and trust me, I am no agent of the state here. I do have no interest or vested interest in the University of Toronto at all. I didn't go to University of Toronto. But before we start protesting, we have to be very specific on what exactly it is we're protesting. Now, I'm going to caveat all of this with I don't have any 23, 24 data because that's not available on the University of Toronto's website. But what I do have is up to 2022. And where all that information is held is right here, the University of Toronto Asset Management Corporation. It's UTAM. It is basically how the university invests. And if you go to reports, it has the annual reports, responsible investing reports, and PRI reports, as well as a bunch of other endowment reports, engagement reports, reports. And if you were to actually analyze all of those reports and break it down by country, which is what I did, thank you, ChatGPT, you get the following. The number one country that the University of Toronto invests in? The United States. 48% of all its investments are in the United States. 25% are in Asia, 15% are in Europe, 2.3% in Canada, and 8.9% in other regions. It didn't get into specifics. And the majority of its investments are actually on environmental, social, and governance issues, ESG. So very much companies who are moving away from fossil fuels, which is its own whole set of, I should do a whole other video on that. But the bulk of the investments are in, well, many of the investments are in sustainable and low carbon strategy companies that put that at the forefront. Anyways, let's go on to hear what Sarah has to say because I have more to say. Let's go.
All right, the university saying, that's fine, but this is actually trespassing because it's private property. It's not a public park. How do you respond to that?
I say that while green spaces and campus lawns are touted as public spaces of recreation and community on orientation day and graduation day, they become privatized, militarized zones once university admin deem them so. The university admin is threatened by the student body applying pressure and mobilizing, by the student body coming together and vocalizing what they all agree on collectively. But we do believe that the university still has the room to do the right thing. Like I mentioned, they can still be leaders in divesting from Israeli apartheid. They can still do that. But at the end of the day, this is our campus, and we will take up space if they ignore our calls, which they have been doing for 6+ months now.
Okay, so let's pause there. So again, Sarah says that this is a militarized zone. So it is private property. The fact that the fact that she is saying, sorry, I got a call there. The fact that Sarah is saying that it's a militarized zone and they're not going to leave until their demands are met, that's no longer protesting. That's illegal behavior. And especially on private property, that is illegal. And the university is within its rights to ask the police to remove themselves. Okay, let's continue because there's more to be said here. Also, I'll get to the South Africa apartheid, which is quite an interesting example that Sarah mentions.
What happens if the police are called in to enforce the law?
Which is legal.
We will not be leaving. Again, this is not just starting now. For the past 6 months, we have used all of the channels available to us to push for divestment, all of the soft approaches. The university has completely ignored our point of view. This encampment is not meant to make anybody feel unsafe. It is University of Toronto students who are permanently demonstrating to get the university to consider our views seriously. What we are talking about is the impact of genocide, the worst case of famine the world has seen in recent times. Still, the University of Toronto continues to invest in the state of Israel. The fact that innocent children are being killed and we are protesting should not make anybody feel unsafe, not Muslim students, not Jewish students, not Hindu students, not Christian students. From a principled perspective, all students should come and join us and stand together in solidarity with the Palestinians who are suffering on ground, and institutional complicity is necessary in this entire system.
Wait a minute. So Sarah says to feel safe, but if you scroll back in that same video, there's a clear flag that says, I mean, you can't see the rest of it, that person standing in the way, from the river to the sea. Now, if I am a Jewish student, that wouldn't make me feel safe. Also, Sarah, I hate to say this, but worst famine in recent time, I don't want to Google that. I'm sure there are other famines that are going on. I can only imagine. But these are very fiery words, and I don't think that they're completely accurate. But let's see what else Sarah says.
We're not going to decide university policy based on a group of student activists. It doesn't work that way.
That's right.
Well, to that, we say that they should be principled in precedent. In the past, they have divested from things like I mentioned, South African apartheid. So why not apply that same principle to Palestinians? It makes no sense.
Okay, let's stop right there. So Sarah actually brings up an interesting point. The University of Toronto did divest from South Africa back in the late 80s after immense pressure from student groups, as well as faculty, as well as the international community, all condemning what was happening in South Africa. I don't think that's the same case when it comes to Israel and Palestine. It is a very divisive topic. I don't think there's enough, and someone in the comments will rip me apart for this, but I don't think there's enough international condemnation by states of what Israel is doing to in the similar vein as what South Africa was doing towards blacks during apartheid in the 70s and late 80s in particular, and then with the release of Nelson Mandela. So I would love to know that. And the reason I say this is an important piece to think about when comparing the South African apartheid to what's happening right now in Israel and Palestine is that what Sarah is conveniently leaving out are the atrocities that Hamas has done. And I'm not trying to pick sides here. But I think the reason why more states are not condemning Israel is because there has to also be condemnation of Hamas, and condemning Israel is almost, some might take it as a validation of Hamas in some way. So again, very dissimilar. And again, it works in Sarah's favor to compare the two because there was pressure the university placed on South Africa by divesting. But it's not a fair comparison. I don't think there's enough international states condemning Israel as a result, similar to not similar to South Africa. And so it's an unfair comparison for Sarah to make. But I don't know. What do you think about that? But before we continue, just want to let you know that I'm going to keep going through this, and I'm going to come back to that Israel investment piece that Sarah keeps mentioning.
They should be following their own precedent, their own divestment principles that they have carried in the past.
You talked about nobody should feel threatened on campus, but we
Yes.
do know some students have said they do feel threatened and they feel uncomfortable. They're worried about their public safety. They just want to go to class. They want to get their grades. They want to graduate. They don't want to get involved in this, and they don't often feel welcome or comfortable. How would you characterize that? Because you said that everybody's welcome.
Yeah, 100%. So we're not obstructing any pathways for folks to go to class. We're in the middle of King's College Circle, now the People's Circle for Palestine, without diminishing
Oh,
the experience.
it's
of others.
renamed the People for Palestine? Wow, okay. Renaming a very important piece to protests, changing the lexicon, changing the words. It matters much more than you might think.
Students, the public outcry of not feeling safe we do hold is an attempt to push the university and law enforcement to limit and silence the student body. We have published a code of conduct which prohibits any harassment of anybody, no matter who they are, what their identity is. There is no physical risk.
Okay, so you publish a code of conduct? Great. Who enforces that?
To safety. If folks do feel unsafe, it is because they hold, like you mentioned, a different point of view. Every university campus have different points of views. Our encampment does not in any way say that others cannot do their own protests. Universities are spaces for all kinds of views, but if students do still feel unsafe because they hold other views, we urge them to go and seek help, mental health resources.
I see. So if you hold a different view, the remedy isn't for you to engage in dialogue. No. It's for you to seek mental health because something's wrong with you. Something is fundamentally wrong with you if you hold a different view. Thank you, Sarah, for basically validating what so many have always said. They feel invalidated because their views are looked at as, I need help. I need mental help because my views are so different than everyone else's. Okay, let's continue.
Health and Wellness Center at the U of T St. George campus. Nobody should feel unsafe. We're not obstructing any pathways to classrooms. But at the end of the day, we do believe that the public outcry of feeling unsafe is just an excuse to take away from this very legitimate movement and protest that is taking place on campus after 6 months of unresponsiveness from this institution.
So she says the unresponsiveness is what's at play. Sarah. I hate to be the person to say this, but you really should have done your research. Turns out not only is the university investing in the United States, Asia, Europe, Canada, other regions. If you really want to break down the investments of the University of Toronto, most of its investments are in Alibaba, Microsoft, Apple, and Alphabet, which is Google. Alphabet, the parent company. Also, they invest in Tencent, Siemens, and guess what? Guess what other company they invest in? AstraZeneca. Whoops. Yep, they invest in AstraZeneca quite a bit. So how could the university divest from Israel? Well, the way it could is it could go to Alibaba and say, by the way, Alibaba, we invested in you and we understand that you've invested in Israeli startups such as Nexar, DataRay, and others. We don't like that, so we're going to divest unless you divest in those Israeli-based companies. Microsoft, Apple, and Alphabet, these tech giants are globally operational, do engage in business in Israel, including research and development in sales centers and operations. However, these activities are commercial and do not directly link to the Israeli government. Tencent also. Operations are primarily focused in China, but it may have some business relationships that include Israeli companies, but no direct links to the Israeli government. Siemens and AstraZeneca, global in sectors like tech and pharmaceuticals, they may have business operations in Israel, but no links specifically with the government. Now, this is not to say any of these companies don't have links to the Israeli government. It's just not publicly available. There's no public information on the University of Toronto's website that indicates that it is directly investing in Israel, number one, and secondly, in companies that do business with the Israeli government. To my knowledge, there's none. Now, that said, with an investment portfolio as large as the University of Toronto, I'm certain there must be some. There's nothing on their website that I would say these students could point to and say, you need to divest from this company, from these securities and stocks because they do direct business with the Israeli government. So this is the question I posed to Sarah and the students at the University of Toronto. Please show me in clear evidence the investments that the University of Toronto is currently making in the Israeli government that you want to see them divest from. I pose that question because it's an important question. The second question I would pose to Sarah and the students that are protesting. You say you're trying to make it a safe space. You have a flag from what that video showed that says from the river to the sea. If you don't understand how that phrase doesn't incite violence, then you really need to rethink your lexicon, the phrases that are at your protests, and how important words matter, because they actually do matter. They do matter for students to feel safe. And I say that because we know that Jewish students on campus historically have felt unsafe, not just in Toronto, not just in Canada, but in the United States as well. It is a phenomenon. It is real. It is there. Finally, Sarah, I hate to say this, but no student who disagrees with you should go seek mental health channels. I actually would say that you have surrounded you just by listening to you, Sarah, if you're listening. I hope you are listening. That you haven't surrounded yourself with people who disagree with you at all. And it comes through in how you characterize people who disagree. I don't think you're ready for a real conversation, Sarah, and I don't think the university is a place where a critical exchange of ideas is happening. That's the message your protest, or the protest that you're a part of, is sending. So that's my rant. Sorry, it's a long one, but I think this really gets to the heart. A lot of these students don't know what exactly their universities are investing in that they can point to and protest about. And second, they say it's a safe space, but their words and their actions prove very different. Anyways, let me know what you think. Am I right? Am I totally off? Let me know in the comment section below.